Welcome to Holy Nirvana. We're looking at Final Fantasy XVI today. It just launched on PC and we're putting it through our benchmark suite, testing it on 9 different GPUs of varying performance levels and price. For this video, we're looking at high-end GPUs, specifically AMD's RX 7900 GRE and Nvidia's RTX 4070. Both of these GPUs cost around $550, although sales can bring those prices down to maybe $500. We've got the medium results running head-to-head right now, but I'm not gonna focus too much on those. Let's just show the chart and you'll see how they rate compared with other GPUs in the overall standings. The 7900 GRE ranks third, well ahead of the RTX 4070, and part of that is because it has more memory bandwidth and more memory. It also has more compute relative to Nvidia for rasterization games like Final Fantasy XVI. Nvidia tends to do better in ray tracing and upscaling, not so much with pure rasterization. Of course, the faster cards like the 7900 XTX and the 4080 Super do rank ahead of it, but that's to be expected. Moving on to 1080p Ultra, this is normally not the sweet spot for a high-end GPU that costs over $500, but Final Fantasy XVI really is quite demanding. Both the 7900 GRE and the 4070 are falling below 60 frames per second on a regular basis. There are areas of the game that will run faster, other areas will run slower, but at least in the town of Lost Wing, which is one of the relatively early areas in the game, you'll see sub 60 frames per second when running at native resolution. And that's why the game has upscaling and frame generation to try and make it run better, but we don't really like those as a standard feature just to get above 60 frames per second at 1080p. In our overall charts, you can see 56 frames per second on the GRE, 51 frames per second for the 4070. Both of them have minimums around 35 frames per second though, so that shows that there's quite a bit of stuttering, and you see that on the top cards as well. The XTX and the Super are sitting at 50 frames per second for their minimums, indicating that the game just has plenty of stutter in its rendering pipeline. Moving on to 1440p Ultra settings, again running native resolution, the 7900 GRE outpaces its counterpart, the 4070, by about 20% almost. And that's a big difference for what is nominally the same price card. Again, it has more memory, and more memory bandwidth, and these are definitely factors. It could also be that Final Fantasy XVI was developed for the PlayStation 5 and now it's ported to PC, but PlayStation 5 does use AMD hardware and so there might be some benefit there. Overall standings, for high-end cards that cost around $550, sitting in the mid-40s to mid to high 30s isn't a great look and minimum frames per second even falls below 30 FPS on these relatively high-end cards. Naturally, if you kick things up to 4K Ultra, that's just going to punish these GPUs even more. Now you'll see both the 7900 GRE and 4070 are really struggling to even get 30 frames per second. There are a few scenes where it might get above 30 FPS, but a lot of the benchmark run that I'm doing through Lost Wing, it will stay below 30 FPS. Overall standings at 4K, you can see we got 26 FPS on the GRE and 23 FPS on the 4070. That's not great, but this is the baseline, and that's why we have upscaling and frame gen to help boost performance. Upscaling boosts the actual performance, and frame gen boosts the perceived frame rate. I like to call that frame smoothing, because it's not really like you're getting more input to increase responsiveness. You're just getting an extra frame rendered with some delay put in, but it looks smoother to the eye for sure. And it feels pretty decent in Final Fantasy XVI, like especially when you're just running around. In combat, frame gen might not be as beneficial, but when you're just exploring, the delay that you feel isn't too bad. Overall, the 4070 and the GRE were relatively close without frame generation, but you can see here that the 4070 doesn't get nearly as big of a boost from frame gen as the GRE does. We end up with about a 30% delta from the 4070 to the GRE. The GRE is just a way better experience in Final Fantasy XVI, with or without upscaling and frame gen, but particularly in this case with 4K quality mode upscaling and frame gen, it just feels way better. And that about wraps it up for this video. Thank you for watching, please like and subscribe, and let me know what else you'd like to see tested.